kiddos! In this video, I will be reading 3 more chapters from Carnival at Candlelight. If you are following along at home, we are on chapter 4, which begins on page 35. And if you remember where we left off, Jack and Annie were trying to sneak in past the guards, and some clowns came over and started kind of distracting the guards, so they quickly slipped in. So chapter 4 is called Rats, and it is on page 35. Jack found Annie standing behind a column in a lantern-lit courtyard. The courtyard was quiet and empty. "Everyone in Venice must be at Carnival," said Jack. "I just hope the ruler is home." "Yeah, we'll ask him if he knows the Grand Lady of the Lagoon," said Annie, "and we'll tell him that he has to help us save her from a terrible disaster." Jack looked at his map of the palace. Several rooms were labeled Ruler's Living Chambers. "I guess that's where he lives," said Jack. "We have to go up some stairs called the Giant Stairs to get there." "The Giant Stairs?" said Annie. "Yeah," said Jack. "Listen to this. These stairs are called the Giant Stairs because they are guarded by 2 large statues of gods from Roman mythology, Mars, the god of war, and Neptune, the god of the sea." "Cool," said Annie. "Let's go." Jack and Annie hurried down the passageway that ran along the courtyard until they came to a wide staircase. On either side of the stairs were giant marble statues of strong-looking men. "Mars and Neptune," said Jack. "This is it. Come on." Jack and Annie quickly climbed the giant stairs. At the top, Jack looked at the map again. "Now we turn right and head for the garden staircase," he said. Keeping an eye out for more guards, they crept down the hall until they came to the fantasy staircase under a gold ceiling. "There it is," said Jack. "Let's climb up." He and Annie hurried up the golden staircase. When they got to the top, they froze. Another guard was slouched against the wall by the stairs. His eyes were closed, and he was snoring softly. Jack motioned to Annie, and they tiptoed past the guard to the entrance of the ruler's living chambers. Jack glanced at the map. "This is it," he whispered. The door was open. Jack and Annie peeked inside. "Knock, knock," Annie said in a soft voice. No one answered. They stepped through the doorway. A fire blazed on the hearth. Overhead, many candles burned brightly. The dancing flames cast shadows on a marble floor and a carved gold ceiling. "I have a feeling the ruler's not here," said Annie. "Maybe we should leave." Jack looked at their book. "Wait, the next room is the map room," he said. "Let's just take a look." "Okay, but we'd better hurry," said Annie. Jack led the way into the map room. Colorful maps hung on the walls. In the middle of the floor were 2 huge globes. Jack sighed. "I love this room," he said. "Look, more lions," said Annie. She pointed to 3 paintings of winged lions on the walls. "Why are the lions with wings everywhere?" Jack looked up winged lions in their book. He turned to the right page and he read, "The winged lion is the symbol of Venice, represented in paintings and sculptures all over the city. The lions stand for strength on both land and sea." As Jack and Annie looked back up at the lion paintings, they heard footsteps. The grouchy guard and the sleepy guard rushed into the room. "Hi, we're looking for," Annie began. "There they are, the thieves!" the sleepy guard shouted at the grouchy guard. "I told you I heard voices." "We're not thieves," said Annie. "We were just looking for your ruler to ask for his help." "She's right," said Jack. "We have to tell him that." "Won't admit your crime, eh?" said the grouchy guard. "The worst cells are reserved for criminals like you. Move!" "But we," Annie started. "Move!" shouted the grouchy guard, raising his rifle and pointing to the door. Jack knew there was no use arguing. He took Annie's hand and led her out of the ruler's living chambers. The 2 guards walked behind them, pointing guns at their backs. "To the end of the hall and down the stairs," growled the grouchy guard. Jack and Annie walked quickly down the hall, then down some steep, narrow steps. They moved through a lot of low stone corridor, and the guards closed behind them. Over the Bridge of Sighs, shouted the grouchy guard, and be sure to sigh when you cross it, because we won't be coming back for a long time. Jack gripped Annie's hand, and they crossed the covered footbridge to another building. Once inside, they started down the lantern-lit hallway, filled with puddles. Jack gripped Annie's hand as they crossed the covered footbridge to another building. Once inside, they started down a lantern-lit hallway filled with puddles. Jack's shoes felt squishy and soggy as he sloshed through the water. "Halt!" shouted the grouchy guard. Jack and Annie stopped in front of a heavy wooden door. The grouchy guard opened the door and pushed them into a dark, damp cell. The door slammed shut. Jack heard a heavy metal bolt clink into place. Then he heard the guards splash away down the hall, arguing with each other. The prison was eerily quiet. It was hard to breathe in the stale cell. It was hard to see, too. Only the dim light of the hallway shone faintly through the barred window. Under the window was a wooden bench. "What now?" Annie asked in a small voice. For a moment, Jack couldn't answer. He was stunned. Minutes ago, they'd been at the bright carnival, and now they were locked in a dingy prison cell. I'll look in the book," he said. Jack felt shaky as he opened their research book. He moved close to the barred windows and read by the dim light. He looked up prison in the index, and he found it and read aloud. The prison cells at ground level in the palace were called the pozzi, meaning wells or pits. They were dank, airless, and filled with rats. Even the government eventually decided they were too cruel. Jack heard a squeak from a dark corner. He stopped reading and looked up. He heard a squeak again. Then the hair went up on his neck. "Was that a rat?" he wondered. "Was that a rat?" said Annie. The squeak came again from the dark corner, then a squeak from another corner. Jack heard rustling along the walls and more squeaking. "Oh, man," he breathed. "There were rats everywhere." "I think it's time for magic," said Annie. "Yep," said Jack. "Definitely." He kept his eyes in the dark corners while Annie reached into the backpack and pulled out Teddy and Kathleen's book. Annie read from the table of contents. "Stand on water, make a stone come alive, make metal soft, turn into ducks." Annie looked up. "Are rats friends?" "Afraid of ducks," said Annie. "Forget the ducks," said Jack. "Just go back to make metal soft. That's what we need to do. You read the rhyme and I'll try to pull the metal bars apart." "Okay, good," said Annie. Jack jumped onto the wooden bench under the barred window. The squeaking grew louder. Jack reached up and felt the iron bars. They were cold and hard and very solid. Jack couldn't imagine bending them. The squeaks were getting louder. Jack gripped 2 bars in the middle of the window and took a deep breath. "Read the rhyme," he said. Annie read aloud. "Iron or copper, brass or steel, Breon saw, Breon Beal." As Annie finished the rhyme, the bars began to glow. They grew warmer in Jack's hands. "I think it's working," he cried. Holding the bars tightly, Jack pulled in opposite directions. Slowly, the glowing bars began to stretch and bend. Jack pulled till there was an opening large enough for Annie and him to fit through. "We did it!" he cried. "Great! Hurry, hurry, the rats are coming!" cried Annie as she jumped up on the bench. Jack heard a chorus of squeaks from all sides of the cell. He looked down. He saw the shadowy shapes of a dozen rats that seemed to be sniffing the air below the window. "Go, go!" Jack cried to Annie. Annie squeezed between the bars and jumped down into the hallway. Jack followed her. He hit the wet floor and scrambled to his feet. "Come on!" he cried. Jack and Annie sloshed down the watery hallway. At the end of it, they nearly bumped right into the 2 guards. Jack and Annie kept running. "Hey!" the grouchy guard shouted, running after them. He reached for Jack, and the other guard tried to catch Annie. Jack and Annie dodged away from them. The guards crashed into each other, falling to the floor. Jack and Annie kept running. They dashed across the Bridge of Sighs. They ran through the corridor and up the steep stone steps. "This way!" cried Jack. He and Annie tore down the hall, heading for the golden staircase. "Hey! Hey!" the guards yelled from behind. Jack and Annie bounded down the golden staircase, 2 steps at a time. They flew down the hall of the giant stairs. They ran past the statues of Mars and Neptune and charged down the long, open passageway. Finally, they dashed through the entrance of the palace and escaped into St. Mark's Square. Chapter 5. Lorenzo. Jack and Annie ran through the square, dodging dancers, fortune tellers, and acrobats. They didn't stop until they were hidden in the middle of a crowd watching a puppet show. As Jack tried to catch his breath, he looked around at all the pirate and animal and clown costumes. He was glad now that he and Annie were dressed in silly outfits too. When they looked at each other, they laughed nervously. Maybe we shouldn't have skipped ahead, said Jack. Yeah, you were right, said Annie. We should have been more patient. Let's go back to the part about the painter, Tipolo. Tipolo. Jack nodded. I think we should go to his house, he said. Maybe he's there after all. Maybe that clown had the wrong information. I hope so, said Annie. The clown said Tipolo lives near the church at San Felice, said Jack. He pulled out their map and studied it. Okay, so we're here in St. Mark's Square, and we have to get there, and he traced the route with his finger. Got it, let's go. Stay in the shadows in case those guards come looking for us. Jack stuffed the book into his backpack. Annie grabbed his hand, and together they squeezed through the carnival crowd until they came to an alley off the square. The wind was blowing harder as Jack and Annie headed down a shadowy alley, then another. They walked between rows of tightly packed shops, cafes, and houses. As they walked farther from St. Mark's Square, the streets became less crowded. After a while, they came to a small footbridge that crossed a canal. As they hurried over the bridge, Jack noticed water sloshing onto the sidewalks. What's going on with the water? He said. Let's ask her, said Annie. She pointed to a young woman locking up her cafe. The woman wore a blue mask and lacy purple dress. Water was swirling around her high black shoes. Excuse me, said Annie. Do you know why there's so much water in the streets? Oh, there has been much rain in the mountains, said the young woman. It all washes down to the lagoon. It makes the water very high. Is it dangerous? Asked Jack. The woman smiled. Oh, no, she said. We often have high water here in Venice. You shouldn't worry. You should go watch the fireworks on the waterfront near St. Mark's Square. Everyone is going there. Thanks, said Annie. The woman waved and went on her way. I guess we can stop worrying about the water, Annie said to Jack. Yeah, said Jack, but he couldn't help worrying as he saw a clump of seaweed wash past them and down the alley. As Jack and Annie walked toward the church of San Felice, a bell started to chime. Jack counted the bongs. 11. Another bell started to toll. Jack counted 10 bongs. What time do you think it is really? He asked. I don't understand. Patience, remember, said Annie. One thing at a time. We just have to find Tipolo's house now. Soon they came to the small church of San Felice. The square next to the church was empty except for an old man walking a small, fat dog. Good evening, little clowns, the man said with a friendly smile. Why aren't you at the waterfront by St. Mark's Square? I'd be there myself, except my Rosa is afraid of fireworks. He smiled at his chubby dog. Actually, we're trying to find the house of the painter named Tipolo, said Jack. Oh, he's my neighbor, said the old man. He lives there. And he pointed to a dark house off the square. But you won't find him home. I know, we've heard he's away, said Jack. We were just wondering if he was coming back soon. Oh, I fear not, said the man. Tipolo told everyone that he would be gone for many months. But you should get along to the fireworks on the waterfront now. Everyone in Venice will be there to see them. They are quite magnificent on the last night of Carnival. Thanks, said Jack. The old man waved. As he and Rosa walked slowly across the square, the church bell began to sound. It bonged 11 times. Excuse me, sir, Jack called. All the clocks in Venice tell different times. Which one is right? None, the old man called. That is one of the wonderful things about our city. Venice is timeless. The man laughed, and he and Rosa went inside a small yellow house. Jack sat down on a bench in the square. He put his head in his hands, and Annie sat next to him. I guess we do have to skip Tipolo, she said. What's the next thing Merlin tells us to do? Jack sighed. He pulled out the magician's letter and read the next 2 lines. At midnight, 2 men will tell you the time. To the top of the tower, hurry and climb. Well, great, said Jack. How will we know if it's really midnight? That man just said that none of the clocks are right because Venice is timeless. Well, according to Merlin, 2 men will tell us the time, right? No, 2 men who own some kind of tower that we have to climb. Right, said Jack, but that makes no sense either. Who are they, and how are we supposed to find them? We'll have to skip that part too. We're skipping our whole mission, whatever it is. A terrible disaster is about to happen to some grand lady of the lagoon, and we have no idea who she is. We don't know what the disaster is. We don't know where to find the ruler of the seas, or how to find a painter named Tipolo, or how to tell the right time. We're completely failing Merlin's test. Calm down. We just have to be patient, said Annie. Everything will make sense soon. How soon? Said Jack. He felt cold and wet and miserable. Very soon, said Annie. In fact, I think I see a light now inside Tipolo's house, she said. I definitely see a light. Annie ran over to the small house off the square. She peeped through the window. Jack, she called in a loud whisper. Come here. Jack walked over to her. Someone's painting in there, she said. Through the window, Jack saw a candle burning in a corner of the room. He saw canvases and pots of paint. He saw a boy standing at an easel. The boy was painting a picture on a large canvas. He's just a kid, said Jack with disappointment. He can't be Tupelo. So what? Said Annie. Maybe he can help us. She tapped on the glass. The boy looked up. He carried his candle to the window and opened it. He had reddish brown hair and big eyes. Hello, he said. Are you looking for someone? I'm Annie, and this is my brother Jack, said Annie. We're visiting Venice, and we were hoping to find a painter named Tupelo. Well, you have just done so, the boy said. My name is Lorenzo Tupelo. Lorenzo had a very serious manner. You're a painter, too? Asked Annie. Yes, as you can see, I'm painting right now. I help my father and my older brother with their paintings, said Lorenzo. And when they are gone, I paint my own. I will even miss the last night of Carnival to paint. But why are you not there? We're on a mission, said Annie. We just escaped from the palace prison. We got caught looking for the ruler of the seas. The ruler of the seas, said Lorenzo. Why are you looking in the palace? The ruler of the seas is right here. What? Said Jack. The ruler of the seas is here? Lorenzo smiled. Then he walked to a large covered canvas propped against the wall. He pulled off the cloth cover. He held up his candle to show a painting of a beautiful woman resting her hand on the head of a golden lion. A man was giving coins to the woman. The man had a bare chest, a rugged face, long dark hair, and a white beard. Behind him was a three-pronged fishing spear. My father has been working on this painting for some time, said Lorenzo. He pointed at the bearded man. 'Tis Neptune. Neptune, said Jack. He's one of the gods of Roman mythology, right? Yes, the ruler of the seas, said Lorenzo. Oh, we thought the ruler of the seas was the ruler of Venice, said Annie. We thought he lived in the palace on St. Mark's Square. Lorenzo laughed. Oh, no, the palace is just the home of our city's human ruler, he said. The true ruler of the seas is Neptune. Well, where does Neptune live, Lorenzo? Annie asked. He lives beneath the water in a beautiful palace made of coral and sparkling jewels, said Lorenzo. But only a few people can actually see Neptune. Like who? Asked Annie. Those with imaginations, like my father, my brother, and myself, said Lorenzo. We have heard the waves around Neptune roar like wild bulls. We have seen his fishing spear rising high above the surface of the sea, gleaming in the moonlight. That sounds great, said Annie. Yeah, great, said Jack politely. You guys must have really good imaginations. Thanks, Lorenzo. He turned to Annie. I'm going to look at the research book some more. Jack walked back to the bench and pulled out their book. He felt totally discouraged. Neptune wasn't a real person. They'd come to another dead end. Annie stayed by the window. Lorenzo, one more question, she said. Why is Neptune giving a gift to that lady? Neptune is offering the riches of the sea to Venice, answered Lorenzo. So the lady in the painting is supposed to be the city of Venice? Said Annie. Yes, said Lorenzo. That is how my father thinks of Venice. She is the grand lady of the lagoon. Jack looked up from the book. He felt goosebumps on his skin. Thanks, Lorenzo, said Annie. You helped us a lot. You're welcome, Annie, said Lorenzo. Good night. Then he closed the window. Jack, Jack, said Annie, hurrying to him. The grand lady of the lagoon is Venice. I know, I heard, said Jack. Now I understand our mission, said Annie. We have to save Venice from a terrible disaster. We have to save all of Venice. Chapter 6, Disaster. We have to save all of Venice, said Jack. That's a big responsibility. What do we have to save Venice from? Well, if Neptune is going to help us, it must have something to do with the water, said Annie. Yeah, like the water that's flooding the alleys, said Jack. But the woman at the cafe told us not to worry about that, said Annie. I'm still worried, said Jack. Let's look up floods in our Venice book. He found floods in the index, and he turned to the right page and read. Most of the time, high water in Venice is not serious. But if several conditions are present at the same time, a flood disaster can occur. A flood disaster? That must be it, said Annie. So what are the conditions? It lists them here, said Jack. A high tide, strong winds from the south, heavy flows of water from the mountains, severe storms at sea. Oh, there's high tide tonight. The passenger with the bird mask and the gondola told us that, said Annie. Yeah, and winds from the south. The weather vane told us that, said Jack. And water's flowing down from the mountains. The woman at the cafe told us that, said Annie. Yeah, and storms out at sea. I saw lightning when we crossed the water, said Jack. All the conditions are here, said Annie. Jack and Annie looked around. The water was now flowing steadily from the alleyways into the small square. It had risen above their ankles. I get it now, said Jack. The water will just keep getting higher and higher until it destroys the whole city, and no one's paying attention. Neptune's the only one who can help us stop the flood, said Annie. But Neptune's not real, said Jack. I mean, he's a character in mythology, and mythology's not real life. It's... Okay, said Annie. Let's just take one step at a time. At midnight, two guys will tell us the time, and then we should climb to the top of their tower, right? Right, said Jack. So all we have to do now is find those two guys, said Annie. Let's go back to the waterfront, said Jack. The man with the dog said everyone in Venice would be there for the fireworks. Jack put away their book. Then he and Annie retraced their steps over the footbridge and back through the alleys. Lots of seaweed was floating in the narrow lanes between buildings. Water is definitely flowing in from the sea, Jack thought. When they got back to the St. Mark's Square, people were streaming toward the waterfront. Jack and Annie walked with the crowd. Everyone was talking and laughing as they looked up at the sky on the water, waiting for the fireworks to begin. No one paid attention to the damp winds or the seawater spilling over the side of the canal, soaking their shoes. Excuse me, Annie shouted. Can anyone tell us the time? No one answered. For just then the first explosion of fireworks shook the night. The crowd cheered as blue and red showers exploded in the sky. In the distance a clock started to chime. Jack counted the bongs. 12, he said. It's midnight now, according to that clock. More fireworks exploded over the waterfront, and another clock began clanging. This time Jack counted only 11 bongs. He shook his head. This is crazy, he muttered. Jack looked around the crowd. Can anyone tell us the real time? He yelled. Is it midnight yet? Can anyone tell us? No one answered. Not even one man, much less two. Everyone was oohing and eyeing over the dazzling fireworks. Another clock began to sound. This one was much louder than the first two. Bong! This is hopeless, said Jack. Bong! We'll never know the right time, he said. Bong! Jack, look over there, said Annie. Bong! We'll never find the two men with the tower, said Jack. Bong! Jack, look, said Annie. Bong! All of Venice is about to drown in a flood, said Jack. Bong! And everyone's just cheering for fireworks, said Jack. Bong! Jack, look, said Annie. She pointed toward the clock tower in St. Mark's Square. Bong! Jack saw a huge bell on top of the tower. Two bronze statues were holding a club and striking the bell. Bong! The statues were of two men. Bong! At midnight, two men will tell you the time, said Annie. Bong! The two men struck the bell for the 12th time and then stopped. Come on, cried Jack. We have to climb that tower. More fireworks thundered over the canal as Jack and Annie pushed their way back through the crowd. They ran into St. Mark's Square and splashed their way to the tall tower with the two men on top. They ran to the arched entrance of the tower and stepped inside. The air was damp and musty. Stairs, said Jack. He ran to a dark, winding stairway and started up. Annie followed. They climbed and climbed until they reached the top of the tower. Jack was breathing hard as he pushed open a heavy door that led out onto the bell terrace. The two statues were frozen on either side of the bronze bell. As soon as Jack and Annie stepped onto the terrace, the wind blew their hats off their heads. The air was filled with cracking and hissing sounds as more fireworks burst through the sky. Everyone on the waterfront was clapping and cheering. What's the next thing Merlin tells us to do? Find Neptune? Annie shouted. Jack pulled out Merlin's letter. Holding onto it tightly as it flapped in the wind, he read aloud. The king of the jungle will carry you there, not over land, but high in the air. The king of the jungle's a lion, said Annie. So it sounds like we need to find a flying lion. Right, said Jack, but where? How about that one? Said Annie. She was pointing over the terrace railing. Jack looked down. Standing on a wide ledge below the stone statue of a lion, growing out of the lion's back were two powerful-looking carved wings. But that's a statue, cried Jack. How can a statue take us anywhere? Annie grinned. I think it's time for a little more magic, she said. We're going to stop there. Tomorrow, boys and girls, we will read our final 3 chapters in our final Magic Treehouse book on our final day of school. Can you believe it? See you later.